Hello and good evening. Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Uh, Unfortunately for everyone, basically we are past the trade-in time on our warranty, basically a refund period on 2025. We've tried the free trial, but sadly we're kind of stuck with it. In any case, we are here today to talk about Blurlink, this thing which I'm going to put on the screen. A log of my face. Look, it's my face, and it's a Lurlink, and sound and captions are good, even better. Things are working. That's a good sign. We like those. So, hello, face. Yes, we are here today, as the description basically quite directly says below me. We are here today to discuss cinematic fights and the City of Mist. Um, Basically, the City of Mist is a role-playing game, basically designed by I just had the name of it. Son of Oak Game Studios. It describes itself as a cinematic modern, basically, well, Legend of Mist is a cinematic modern fantasy. Modern is basically, it refers to it as it's a cinematic noir-esque superhero, legendary, mythical, urban fantasy type system. Um, it's kind of an interesting take on the superhero genre. You can see in the link that just got posted. Thank you. Thank you, 20. Yeah, but it is. Where's my PDF button? There's my PDF button. It is a game basically ordinary people and legendary powers. It is essentially it is a superhero system in the fact that you're going to have people doing extraordinary things. Magic could be cast about, people could be flying, people could have magic swords, all sorts of weird stuff is going on. And in fact, basically as a fun fact, in case your connection to your connection to Lorelink for today, that name right there, TR Knight, is a friend of Lorelink and a friend of mine. I had forgotten that he was involved in proofreading on this book, but there he is. He was also involved with this. So, hey TR, wherever you are, I know where he is, but I don't know where he is at this moment. He's not in the stream. How about that? But in any case, basically the idea behind the system is that the City of Mist is this city kind of possessed by a otherworldly force is probably the best word to describe it, where basically the mythoi, are attempting to kind of invade the city, and they do so by taking over rifts, which is the name of people who are essentially conduits for the mythos. So whatever mythos you want to think of, you can make as a character in the game, and that's one of the game's kind of selling points is the fact that, hey, basically, do you want a game where basically King Arthur runs around with Enkidu from from Gilgamesh, as well as Cloud from Final Fantasy, and maybe Goku from Dragon Ball. Sure, that's all possible, technically, in City of Mist. Basically, what a lot of people end up trying to do in superhero games, because a lot of times when you have a superhero games, you bring it to the table and you're like, hey guys, let's play a superhero game. And so you'll have people who you mean Cloud from Magic the Gathering. Nice, timely reference, yes. Now Cloud from Magic the Gathering. I prefer to think of him as Cloud from Ehrgeiz, the Square Enix fighting game, which is just as silly a reference. And so I don't think he's actually appeared in any Disney properties yet. He's probably is in I think they're in Fortnite by now, right? Final Fantasy has to have appeared in Fortnite by now. So essentially, basically, Fortnite is actually kind of an apt descriptor in the fact that you can. Yeah, he was definitely in Kingdom Hearts. Yes, he was kind of smashed up with Vincent in Kingdom Hearts. But Fortnite's actually not a bad kind of descriptor of what City of Mist is. But basically, when you bring a superhero game down to the table, you end up with kind of two different groups of people. You end up with people who are going to be like, oh, I'm going to create my own original, unique thing, and I'm going to pour through, like, we've talked about superhero games in the past, and they're usually pages upon pages upon pages of superpowers in the back of the book, which are all tweaked and balanced, and basically attempted to be balanced, and so you end up with basically teleportation. You basically have a teleportation power, which does something in a system. You have a magic power, which does an elemental blast power, which does its own thing. You have a flight power. You have basically a clone, a duplicate power. Sephiroth was in Kingdom Hearts. Oh yeah, Sephiroth and Cloud are definitely in Kingdom Hearts. Sephiroth is voiced by Lance Bass in the first game for reasons, which that was an amusing time period when Square Enix fans lost their minds because how dare a boy band member voice Sephiroth, their super cool basically weeaboo guy. Yes, Lance Bass from NSYNC was the voice of Sephiroth in Kingdom Hearts 1. It drove basically, oh my gosh, a boy band member is basically voicing our super cool hero. He was okay. I mean, as far as dub voices goes. Is it actually Lance Bass? Oh, okay. I always thought it was Lance Bass. Okay. Like they were rumored to be Jedi in Attack of the Clones. Yeah. Yep. Basically, it's that same thing happened there. But with with those lists of powers and things like that, you end up with you get people pouring through stuff. It must have been a Backstreet fan. You end up with people kind of pouring through those lists, and they'll one group of some people will make their own original stuff, and they'll grab random powers and slap them in. And basically try to figure out exactly what they could build, and either maybe try to break the system or just try to build something interesting that cinematically fits what they're coming up with. However, basically however they want to do it. And another group of people is just going to sit down and be like, hey, can I create Wolverine? Can I create Green Lantern? They're rumored for 2025. Interesting. So basically people and so you end up with this, and so you end up with even the people who are creating their own stuff, they're going to be influenced by what superheroes they know and they've seen. So they're going to try to create they're going to create, well, what this is Green Lantern crossed with this guy from Wild Cards crossed with Spawn. And because superheroes are so ubiquitous in society, it's hard to someone tells you to create a superhero, and even if you come up with an original one, odds are good your first draft is going to be something with the serial numbers filed off, potentially smashed into something else with the serial numbers filed off. So City of Mist kind of gets around that by saying, no, that's fine. We don't have to we don't have to come up with every single superhero power there could be and balance them, etc., etc. We'll just say, yeah, you could be Goku, you could be Superman, you could be like a lot of the examples they give go into even like deeper myths and things like that. You could be King Arthur, you could be Mordred, you could be the emperor from the fairy tale, like what is the kind of the pre-made that's in the the back of the MC. The MC is the name of the GM in this system, Master of Ceremonies. Is the fact that basically is, hey, it's the Emperor from the fairy tale, from Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Nightingale. And some of the other characters running around are the basically like the Nightingale and the Mechanical Nightingale, and he's facing, basically he's having a problem. Basically he's interacting with Hades, basically of mythos, basically of Greek. Yes, Hades is Greek. Hades is Greek. Pluto is Roman. He's interacting with Hades, basically, and having a conflict with him. And so your characters could be like, the example characters they have are like Enkidu or things like that. And they're like, yeah, you could be all of those, but the thing is, Pluto is Disney. Basically, the thing that they do is the fact that they're like, hey, so what happens is, basically they are much like kind of the Fortnite idea, the fact that basically your characters are basically the same. Basically, you're still whatever person you were in the city, but this myth, for whatever reason, has been attracted to you and basically has sought you out as a rift into the city of Mist for some reason. And they are using you to accomplish their story. And so you have your own personality, your own goals, your own identity. Basically, and the mythos has their own identity and goals. And the game kind of sets itself up as a conflict between them, basically dealing with the conflict between those two as you attempt to accomplish whatever goals you have either set up for your character or whatever, because it's very much it basically kind of sets itself as a noir detective piece, trying to investigate whatever is going on in the city, dealing with this, essentially the city full of basically either people who have no clue what's going on, called sleepers, or various people who have basically awakened to varying degrees of their mythos, and basically kind of sorting out what's going on with them. Basically, so you will have Hades, who's essentially attempting to bring, I hesitate to use the word hell on earth because that's crossing your crossing Christianity and Greek myth there, but essentially bringing Hades to Earth. Basically, that's his stated goal in the book. And so you're interacting with a character who's given himself fully over to the avatar of Hades, and is just attempting to accomplish Hades' goals. And you might have various others who have awakened to greater or lesser extents to their mythos, and they have their own goals, their own drives, and the balance of the game, and where it stops you from being, yeah, you're Ryu from Street Fighter, Ryu from Streets. You are Goku from Dragon Ball. Is the fact that you are basically, the more you give into your powers and go along with what they're pushing you to do, basically you start to lose more of your own identity, your own background, your own things which are connecting you to being immortal. AKA basically like a lot of what they talk about for identities and things like that are people or places or events or things like that have tied you to the basically to this world. Like, for example, they have like you have a routine, a job or something like that keeps you attached. Like a routine, a job or occupation, a political position, a role in an organization, a school, daily, basically just surviving every day. Hey, Wolf Mom. And then you have stuff like Other identities can be like your possessions. You have a car, or basically your gear or other stuff is what keeps you grounded in who you are. And so basically your personality, a mission. Basically, a mission obviously covers a lot, anything from basically I'm doing good to revenge to a sworn oath to an obsession to an ongoing search. And I like this picture here because it does a good job of kind of basically kind of grounding kind of what this game is about. It's the defining relationship basically. So like you have this father and basically on this side of the picture you have that father and son thing going. Basically like, hey, he obviously loves his kid, and basically has an attachment to his kid. But on the flip side, basically the mythos side of things is pushing him and driving him to do things that may eventually cause a rift in that relationship, will cause problems or trouble or other stuff, or basically what is he solving with this mythos? What is he using this mythos for to try to help the relationship, and trying to basically, is he trying to do something like that? And so that's the balance this game is wanting to kind of strike with you. Is sure, we'll give you those powers, but they come with a pretty hefty price tag of you're giving up your mortality to use them. It's not a direct one-for-one. This is a powered by the Apocalypse system. Basically, that is an overarching. Basically, that is a base game system that had a really cool, unique basically mechanic set that a lot of people started basically copying and things like that. And he made the game freely available, and so a lot of people took that system and tweaked it and modified it and then added their own elements to it, like this system did. And it's also known for basically one of the big ones that is based off of this is one we've talked about here before on the channel, Blades in the Dark. Blades in the Dark is probably, I would say, the most successful powered by the Apocalypse game, outside of basically finding powered by the Apocalypse as successful based on the number of things that copied it. But basically, most well-known version of it is probably Blades in the Dark, which of course added its own things to it. And because it's a Blades in the Dark, powered by the Apocalypse type system, it basically, you don't really have basically you don't have a really crunchy mechanical system underneath all of that. You end up with what they have here, which are power tags, which are basically things that you gain those by answering questions for basically like what kind of strong emotion did your defining event leave you with? Filled with rage, a sense of unity of life, driven to meet up justice, ambition. And you can see down here, like basically this person chose for this, they're never say his name defining event, they're like driven to meet out justice. And basically they also chose what object did you take away from that? A picture of my enemy, and basically a fake smile. And so those are the powers they're driving from, and this is their mortal identity. So these aren't going to be superpowers necessarily, but they're things that the player can call out when they're trying to do something, to be like, hey, my character is driven to meet out justice. I think that applies here. Oh, okay. I have a picture of my enemy, a picture of my enemy. Oh, and that's not basically, and that basically be like, oh, basically, but the idea basically that's helping you identify things, helping you to basically possibly ground yourself in your so you're being attacked. You're being attacked mentally, maybe you're pulling that out and looking at it. Again, these aren't meant to be necessarily superpowers in the traditional sense. They're meant to be basically like these are more basic, basically kind of more driven skills and things like that. Like Like as you can see some of those on like the routine one, a bit like mission Lilith must die, map of the subway system, urban tales and legends, police connections. Obviously, you can see where police connections could be called on to get something, basically to do something. They also have weakness tags, which is essentially everything has its flip side, its downside. That you're answering a question of, hey, what basically what's the downside to whatever this is which is driving you, and yours is I can't do this alone. I need people, and so basically if I'm trying to do stuff on my own, the MC might call out, hey, your weakness tag for that is can't do this alone. You're going to take a penalty to do this because you've decided to try to lone wolf this. Oh, okay. And then the superpowers basically work on basically a similar type system where you are making your own basically you're making your own powers by answering those power questions earlier. Take another person's identity, steal their memories, momentarily shift into fairy. Like, obviously these are all basically very supernatural type powers, things like that. But they've taken a weakness with it. They've set themselves up as being that this superpowered identity they're pulling from is Fae. And so they're basically, okay, here's the good, here's the bad, and then there's this basically, who are my real parents? Is their mystery which they're trying to solve? Basically, essentially, it's something which is associated. Basically, what is the goal of this mythos? How does this mythos manifest with your character? Because that's the thing that they talk about with this is you aren't King Arthur, you aren't Robin Hood. If you are a rift for the Robin Hood persona, that might manifest just as robbing the rich, basically robbing the rich and redistributing to basically giving to the poor. And it may basically your powers may end up being basically that you're a great woodsman, basically that you're a born leader, things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean the fact that if you throw that persona a bow, they're going to be basically they'll be like, yeah, I can bullseye basically any target, because you're choosing what powers that your rift is taking, which reflect what you're thinking, that how you are thinking that this mythos is manifesting in your character interacting with why the mythos got attracted to you. So like this is a character who's basically missed their parents, possibly doesn't feel like they belong, don't feel like they fit in. Maybe they're maybe some of their defining, maybe they have an attachment to family and things like that, and that's some of their that's going to be some of their identity. And they're using that, they're driving with the mythos that this character doesn't feel like they belong, they don't feel like they fit in, and so their powers over here are pushing them towards losing kind of their identity, as it were. Whereas basically like the mystery is basically kind of pushing them towards figuring things out, and maybe one of their logos is pushing them to figuring things out. And so that is how this system kind of balances that, basically those powers out. Powered by the Apocalypse, basically a lot of how Powered by the Apocalypse works is, Powered by Apocalypse is more of a conversation between the player and the MC, in this case, GM and elsewhere. In the fact that it is the MC is setting up a situation, and the characters are going back and forth discussing, hey, what about this? Okay, this and this and this, and then basically when it comes time to basically take action, they're kind of trying to establish, okay, I think that these things apply to what I'm doing here. I'm thinking that this is involved, basically this is me stealing someone else's identity, so I think I should get a boost for that, as well as basically stealing their memories and things like that. So I'm getting two bonuses for this, and then your die roll is just a simple roll 2d6, add your powers in, subtract the weaknesses in, and see what the die roll is. Basically also dealing with any statuses and things like basically the other statuses and things like that have been put on you. We'll talk about that in a bit. But that's basically, it's a relatively straightforward system. Roll 2d6, and then you're adding numbers based on basically kind of that conversation you have between the player and the MC of, hey, I think this is how the situation is playing out. This is why I think my character would be able to succeed at this, is because it plays to their strengths in these areas. Basically, you're like, oh, okay, cool. Basically, and then when stuff happens, it isn't just a simple, oh, hey, you take 3 points of damage. Okay, cool. You're taking more. Basically, the things that you are taking are more like you're taking additional temporary tags onto yourself because of what was done with you. If someone, basically, if you're being shot by somebody and they roll okay, but not basically great, the result might be the fact that basically like, oh, I got winged in the leg, or basically so now I'm basically limping from a bullet wound, or basically shot in the arm, and that's a 2 penalty. Basically, it's a shot in the arm -2, and so it's going to be a 2 penalty to anything I do involving my arm. Or maybe I'm stunned, or basically if they were trying to charm me, basically you're trying to charm somebody, maybe they take a beguiled status, and so now someone else can come in and interact with them and be like, okay, now that they're beguiled and they have a 2 penalty from that, I'm going to push them into basically guiding me to this direction or doing this, and that beguiled penalty is going to stack on top of, basically is going to make it easier for me to interact with them and move on, basically. And so you're crafting this conversation, you're picking things out, you're taking things basically, and you're kind of building up this basically interactive kind of situation where it's a whole lot of, yes, because of this happening in the past and things like that, here's how this story is playing out. And the dice are just there to essentially, when it comes to basically add a little bit of random element of when it comes down to when you're actually in the moment, how successful is what you're doing in the final moment, as it were. I'm not going to go into all the detail over basically of how City of Mist worked, because I don't want to pull this isn't meant to be a review of City of Mist. There's a whole lot of stuff on powers and moves and things like that, and hard moves and soft moves. It's the same thing. But mostly what I'm looking at and wanting to talk about is just basically, so the key thing basically I'm looking to take out of this is that when it comes back to time to actually do your game, as long as you're willing to get into the kind of side, as long as you're willing to kind of get into it's definitely going for that kind of noir thriller type vibe, where it is your main characters aren't just like, we're Superman, I'm Superman and I'm gonna punch punch evil so hard that it stops being evil, and more going with the I have succeeded, but at these costs. Things thing is in actions. Success costs you something when it happens, and there's it's very much kind of that like I just saw Casablanca this weekend. That same idea of, yeah, the heroes are successful, but nobody comes out of that movie untouched by what has happened in it. They've all changed in some sort of way, possibly for the better, depending on how you want to look at it. but definitely basically everyone that basically they've accomplished their goals and they've dealt with their past, and basically there's a resolution, but it isn't necessarily basically it isn't just a cut dry. Well, basically now everyone is in a much better position than they were at the start, the end. And that's kind of the theme, the basically kind of the vibe that City of Mist is going for. I haven't looked much into their newest game, which is coming out. I think is already out. I think it's available now. Nope, it's still in pre-order. They're doing basically a fantasy take on basically City of Mist called Legend in the Mist, which is basically essentially them taking their City of Mist engine and applying it to a more traditional fantasy. They call it a rustic fantasy RPG. So that'll be interesting to see when that comes out. We may come back and revisit it. But what we're here to talk about is cinematic fights and things like that. And the reason why I kind of picked City of Mist as the thing to talk about. Do they have any games that hit? Took me a second. The reason why I wanted to talk about City of Mist for this is the idea of the fact that for a cinematic fight to work, you need to work with your players, and that's kind of where we're going with this in terms of how we want to. Let's go down here, create a campaign. Build this last stand in downtown since we're kind of just building this really quickly. So basically, for a cinematic type of fight, you're thinking about stuff like Indiana Jones, basically that kind of fights. If you're going with superheroes, the biggest obvious one is the big fight scene in Avengers. Possibly the fight in Superman, the newest one, Man of Steel. Fight between Superman and Zod through downtown Metropolis. Things of that nature. Your players have awesome, cool powers that they picked out either because they are playing basically in City of Mist or playing actual literal reincarnations essentially of gods and legends. Or because they're playing a superhero game, which has given them a taste of that. Let's get a taste of those powers, where they've got elemental blasts and strength to swing swords that cleave through buildings and other stuff like that. But all of that stuff requires one thing, which you a lot of times you can lose track of when you're doing your more traditional RPGs. For a more traditional RPG, a lot of the time, if I go into one of the other ones we've got around here, let's see here. There we go. So I've got this. We got this map. Here we go. And one thing you'll quickly it's got the battle grid. It's very nice. It's very nicely defined in nice squares that everybody can move through, things like that. But one thing you're not really seeing in here is these rooms are, for a lot of it, just kind of empty. They're just there. They have some stuff in it. This has got some pillars and it's got some statuary and things like that. This room has 3 pools of different colors. But this room here, there's nothing there. There's barely anything in here. There's barely anything in here. And you'll probably, basically, as a GM, you'll probably fill that with a monster or two. Basically, maybe a trap. Possibly some combination thereof. But that doesn't really lend itself to cinematic. Basically, it lends itself to what we really often as GMs kind of fall into, which is that the pattern of allowing our players to get away with, what are your actions for this round? Well, I'm going to hit it, I'm going to hit it, then I'm going to hit it again. Basically, assuming a Pathfinder 3-action system. D&D, I'm going to move up to it and hit it. And maybe use my bonus action if I have one to hit it again. Things like that. And we can very often allow ourselves and our players to fall into that trap in terms of, hey, that's just all combat becomes. And combat kind of becomes this slog that you run into, especially when you get to higher levels, and basically effects take longer to figure out, and math starts to pile up, and so hitting is roll d20, add this number, add this number, this number. Are we using that effect? Okay, add another bonus 1 or 2, etc., etc. Oh, we've got it all figured out. Cool. The mage does something ridiculously complicated and basically throws down a bunch of water and stuff, basically things like that. And occasionally, the mages or the wizards or the warlocks will throw something out there that gets weird and different and does other stuff. But a lot of that basically, but a lot of times you can fall into that trap of just letting stuff kind of just happen. And you really don't want to, basically, that doesn't really work for cinematic. That doesn't really work for interesting or intriguing combat. Now, part of that basically is the fact that a system like Pathfinder and D&D don't really lend itself to that. Basically, your character in Pathfinder or D&D has the ability to hit stuff. That's the ability that's listed on their character sheet. Hit things. They have skills. They totally have skills on there, and there's no skill. Basically, they have investigation or perception or alchemy or crafting or other stuff. But those skills don't really have any link to the combat system. And so, basically, you have to, so you as a GM, if you're wanting to run more cinematic fights, you're wanting to basically realize that the first step is going to be coming from you. But it's going to take interaction from your players to keep going. And so, you need to stop and think, okay, do I think that the group I'm interacting with will want to get behind the idea of more descriptive, more interesting, more intriguing combat? So can we do cinematic combat? Can we have a big knockdown fight? If you're like, no, I don't think our group would really go for it, then basically probably shouldn't run a superhero type game. You're going to run into problems. Your group is going to look at you really weird and confused when you start doing some of this stuff, and it isn't going to work. Because sometimes you need to figure out what your group is. As always, at session 0, or even a couple of sessions in after you started playing, figuring out what your group is there for. If your group is there mostly for, hey, I really enjoy just the RP stuff, and I just like talking and doing things like that, trying to be like, hey, I need you to be more interested in combat, to be like, well, I didn't really build my character to do that. We're more interested in just kind of having fun, hitting things with making big number go up, and smacking thing with a sword and rolling the natural 20 and watching something's hit points get reduced ridiculously fast by a large greatsword upside the head. That's fine. That is perfectly fine. Some groups are going to be like that. Some groups are going to have more fun with that kind of gameplay. Some groups are more there for we're there for the dungeon explorer. Yeah, this type of fighting reminds me of Feng Shui too. Yes, basically, this is basically this sort of stuff is a slightly different type of game that you're looking for. You're going to you're going to be involving, you're going to be pulling your players in, and you're going to be encouraging them to give you more action, more descriptive. And some games ask for that more than basically more than D&D and Pathfinder. Feng Shui 2 being an awesome example of that. Feng Shui is another great basically kind of system where you are asked basically, like, it has a really ridiculously kind of simple base system. I've got martial arts, and that martial arts does everything. It lets me punch people in the face, and it lets me block people punching me in the face. Or guns. Or anything else. But that system doesn't thrive. If you just play it like that, they're like, you shouldn't be using this game. That game thrives from, hey, I want to hit 3 or 4 people in this room, and I want to do it. Basically, you're like, okay, I will let you. Basically, the system lets me let you do that. You just have to give me a description for it, and that comes basically so that comes to our first point, which is you have to give your players that description. Basically, start setting the playing field. If you look at basically like we were talking about with the map, rooms are empty. Rooms don't have anything interesting in them. Basically, if you think about any movie, even fantasy movies like Conan the Barbarian, or basically things like basically I'm trying to think of Lord of the Rings. Doesn't really have cinematic. I mean, I guess Lord of the Rings, basically like the fight against the cave troll is a good example of cinematic fantasy combat. That fight ranges all over that room. Characters are interacting with the environment, doing a ton of different stuff. They're going behind pillars, they're hiding, they're ducking, they're leaping on top of the monster and things like that. And so you need to the first thing you need to do is you need to start basically when you're doing your planning is when you set up that downtown street, basically if you're doing a superhero game. Yeah, basically, like what's the Lord of the Rings is a walking solo cinematic combat. Yeah, he's grabbing a shield, and basically he doesn't walk down the stairs and then shoot things. He grabs a shield from a nearby fallen enemy, jumps on top of it, and decides to single-handedly invent skateboarding or basically possibly snowboarding, basically in the Tolkien in Middle Earth by going down on the shield and kicking off of it and basically firing things. He's stabbing people with arrows and then using those same arrows to shoot something else. Basically that right there, that fight, that one last one I gave is a perfect example of, hey, I have basically in Feng Shui, you have basically your character has archery as an attack skill, and they're like, I want to hit 2 creatures with it. I want to hit the one in front of me, and I want to hit the one over there. Cool, you could split your die pool. We need an explanation for it. That's the type of things you're wanting to get out of it is, oh yeah, I stab them in the eye with the arrow and then I fire it. Is that utterly and absolutely ridiculous and basically would not work out in any actual realistic situation? You are correct. 100%. Also, Legolas is dead because nobody lives to be several hundred years old. So, we're already beyond reality. We've lost the point on that already. But your deal basically set the scene for your players. Give them things to systems like Powered by the Apocalypse and Fate and things like that like to give you. Basically, what they encourage you is the idea of the fact that the story is made up of elements that can be grabbed and used. So if I describe a street, I want to have when I'm describing it to basically, I want like half demolished mailboxes, mail, Harsh wind. Basically, sidewalk. The number of what's garbage in it? Basically, basically in all of these things you've got the mailboxes, basically you've got the parking meters, you've got basically the glass front, basically discarded scooters, the glass front of a coffee shop. Basically, throw these, basically you don't have to call them out. You don't necessarily have to tell your players, here are the things which are interactable in this scene. It's not like the old cartoons where you could basically, when the camera would pan across it, you could always tell the things that could be basically that the cartoon was going to interact with, because they weren't painted as part of the background. They were their own separate cells. But put them out there and let your players basically kind of pull stuff out of it. Something basically, speaking of Feng Shui too, one of the things I love that they do is when they give you, basically they have an entire book. I believe it's In Your Face Again. I think In Your Face Again is the book that basically has all the descriptions. But it's Feng Shui 1, not Feng Shui 2. And I keep saying Feng Shui, and it's not, it's Feng Shui. But it's basically, when they set up a description they have an entire book which is just a bunch of quick fight scenarios and situations and things like that. And they love to basically to give you this kind of stuff in the description, but the other thing that they do is that they have a list of basically they take a basically like good stuff nearby. Open manhole. Mahole. Basically, man. They go through and they list out a bunch of stuff that they've kind of, well, basically not necessarily called out in the scene description proper, things that can happen during a fight on a downtown street. Basically. Basically, things like they pull out some of those things, and you have those ideas sitting there, so that basically, because here's the trick. Not everybody is great. Basically, it's not Critical Role or Dimension 20. Not everybody is going to walk into a situation where you set things up and be able to rip off an amazing, beautiful description of, I pick up the bad guy, I'm going to basically grab him by his ankle, swing him around so that his head smashes into multiples of the parking meters, basically breaking through the last one, causing loose change to spill down onto the ground. Basically before I heave him off towards that nearby transformer, basically slamming it into it and basically causing him to meet a painful and shocking end. And basically now I also have I've got the coins will basically slip up enemies who attempt to run at me from that direction. Yes, I know that most parking meters don't take coins these days; they're all credit cards. But hey, you can do whatever you want in your fight scenes. Not everyone's going to come up with that just off the back of their head, or basically during combat, things like that, or like the fantasy examples of grabbing shields and surfing down stuff, of basically flipping over the table, and basically using that as a battering ram as you charge into the enemies. Basically assuming that there's a flaming dish of food on a nearby table which can be hurled into the face of basically one of your opponents. You're fighting in a fast food joint. You're bouncing opponents off of stacks of frozen foods and then bouncing their head, dunking them into an active fryer nearby. Yeah. Grab the flatbed trailer and slam it down on the villain's head. Yep. But basically, what's it effective? Because again, basically a lot of the time what you're dealing with is basically the dice, and the dice can do stuff. But that basically the thing is what you're wanting to encourage is starting players to get that, and that comes from you setting them up for success by giving them stuff that they can interact with in the environment, and then allowing them to interact with it. Don't shut them down. Don't be like, oh, you don't have improvised weapons, so you can't hit that person with the turkey leg because you don't have improvised weapon. I don't think you pouring the grease onto the ground is really going to create a slippery surface. Be like, okay, cool, yes, this is basically what you want. Basically throwing all that stuff in there and being like, yes, okay, you use it, and then possibly giving basically some of these things you're writing here have effects. Basically, like if I'm running City of Mist, I'm going to be doing stuff like, okay, opponent now has basically stuck upside down 1. Basically things like that. Basically go through the math. Basically keep things. Basically, again, the key for all this is to keep things moving. If you slow down too much, like basically, obviously your players are going to throw some wild and wacky stuff, and again, you don't have the magic of a TV editing on your side to be able to instantly come up with the correct solution and respond to it instantly. You make a pause. But if you just stop and go, I don't know, let me look in the book, flip through stuff, it loses it. Either it loses some of the charm, your players aren't going to want to engage with it because they're going to see it as slowing things down and being a little bit of a bother. Answer them basically affirmatively and basically quickly. Be like, yes, that's awesome, great, cool. Here's what I'm thinking happened. If they come up with something else, like, oh, hey, I think that would give them blinded. Basically, here's the effect I'm going for. I think basically there's now a blinded effect. I think there's now a slippery surface because of the coins I threw. Basically, the coins that got spilled onto the ground. I think it's now dark in this room because I think that extinguishes the torches. I think the rubble from that flatbed trailer that as it explodes, while I may not have done as much damage as I want, maybe now I've put some using it. It's harder for them to move. Maybe they're kind of restricted in their movements because of what I did. Okay. Working with that, and even if you're like, I can't think of something, come up with something relatively quickly. You need the key, of course, is being consistent, and the only way you're going to get that is with practice. So you've got to keep your first session is not going to be as good as your 15th session, which isn't going to be as good as your 30th session. But the cool part is your friends are going to have fun the entire way. I mean, if you're playing either if nobody is having fun in your game, you either need to come up with a new game, or I almost said new friends, but that's the right way of saying it. You need to adjust the situation and find out what the group is wanting. Unless someone's being absolutely dorks about it, in which case, yes, then you need new friends. That's it. but basically keeping things moving, keeping things snapping, basically adding, basically grab this mechanic, basically like I talked about before, basically, and note, I talked about all of this in terms of basically City of Mist and things like that. Don't think that you can't pull this into other systems. Basically, Pathfinder and basically Pathfinder has pluses and minuses, -1s, -2s. Those are famously, like in Pathfinder 2 now, a +1 or a -1 can be huge. It doesn't necessarily break the, oh, this person can suddenly hit something they shouldn't be able to hit. They're not going to be able to slay the ancient dragon because of a +1, but it might push a hit from being basically it might push something from a miss to a hit. It might push something from a hit to a crit, which basically that gets really exciting. Like, oh, okay, this has a huge impact because, hey, this +1 or +2 is now pushing me into reaching that threshold for +10 in Pathfinder. D&D has its basically has advantage and disadvantage, which is a really fun and simple way of being like, cool, that's an awesome idea, you gain advantage. Cool, that's awesome, they get disadvantage on their next thing. Basically, and things like that. And so you can let them modify the situation, start to fill in the descriptions of the room, let your players take advantage of what's going on, and push things in. In this case, basically the other part for superhero is, in addition to stuff like this, is a lot of the time that your characters are going to have different power levels in a superhero type thing. Look at the Avengers. The Avengers, they have, Steve Rogers, who's basically best at the best of the best of mortal peak physical fitness. You've got Tony Stark, Iron Man, basically with, can destroy can negligently destroy tanks whenever he needs to. You've got Thor, literal god of thunder, and a mythical hammer. You've got Hulk, who can fall out of literally fall out of from tens of thousands of feet up and be fine. And then you got Hawkeye and Black Widow, whose powers include arrows, and guns, and some really nice gymnastics. Your power levels are going to be kind of skewed because the arrows are cool. The arrows are cool, and the arrows do have powers. I'm always reminded of the Saturday Night Live sketch, which is like where basically Jeremy Renner came on and was playing Hawkeye, and they're like, they're having that big fight, big climactic, they're all in a circle thing. It's like, all right, Hawkeye, you need to go over there. He's like, no, I'm done. What? Basically, I'm out of arrows. What? How many arrows do you think it needs? Like, what do you mean? I'm like, I can only fit like 11 arrows in this thing. You only brought 11 arrows to this fight? Yeah. And I killed 11 enemies. You're welcome. I'm done. But, basically giving your players, that's what minions are for. If you have the big bad who you know that your more heavily physically powered players are going to be interacting with, you have those out there, but you also have minions. There's always small things running around that your other characters who are more proficient in, like, obviously Black Widow and Hawkeye are more meant to be, hey, we're more subtle, we're more stealth, etc., etc. And so you give the minions that they don't have problems, they can take care of fairly easily. And they can come up with cool and creative ways to take out multiples of the minions, because they're minions. They should go down really easy. You shouldn't be throwing a bunch of minions at them and being like, no, he's still up after a hit. No, he's down. You've got 10 more of them in the wings. If you need to throw more into a fight, you can do that, because they are like Lay's potato chips. You just can't, you can't, but actually no, it's Pringles. You can't, but you can't have just one. I think that's Pringles. Or is that Lay's? Oof. Pringles is when you pop, you can't stop. I think Lay's is bet you can't have this one. I'll be corrected, I'm sure. Split up your stories at the time of your winter stories arc that plays your spy tide, followed by Ragnarok that plays the more powerful group. Yep, yeah, basically share the spotlight. Basically let the focus be on one type of one type of fight, then basically have another type for for your players. Or even like the Avengers fight scene gives all the player basically throws the caps in, basically lays, but you can't just eat one. Ah, I was right. Okay. Um, Captain America does his big thing, which is you put civilians in harm's way. You give them people to rescue. Again, in a traditional superhero, and even the noir one, basically that idea of the fact that you're dealing with people. Basically, you're dealing with people who are trying to basically risk it to save stuff or save people. They're not just doing it for necessarily their own selfish ends. Basically, they're motivated by the desires to save or protect or defend. And so you give them things to save, to protect, to defend. Basically, there's like, yes, it's cliche to have the woman with the baby carriage who just happens to be crossing the street at the wrong moment. But or basically the bus is full of puppies and then the buses with nuns going past each other. Um, Sometimes it's impossible to get rid of a bomb type thing where basically those are things where your other characters can step up, they can get people out of there, they can make their sacrifices to help, to protect. You have goals which are not necessarily straight combat in there as well, like in the examples of the the Avengers. Basically, you have the Hawkeye and Natasha figure out, oh hey, we need to focus. Basically, while they're dealing with Loki and the big things, we need to figure out how to shut down the portal. Oh, okay. So basically, they're focused on that. That target, and you're going to basically like again, but basically you're splitting your combat, you're splitting your party. It's going to be a little bit harder on you, which means you need to get that planning stuff done ahead of time. Have basically knowing what your situations are that you're throwing all your players into. You also need to know what type of what your players' strengths are. Make sure you have those down so you know basically when you're planning things out, you're like, oh, that's right, this player's strength was, they have the ability to do X or Y. Things like that. Basically, know their character sheets just as well, if not better than your players do. So that when you're playing, basically, you're calling them out. Basically, you can use the feature on here. Like if I create. I create the Golden Crusader, and I'm talking about the downtown street. I'm looking at one of the things. Basically, have your notes in here to be like, okay, because players sometimes forget what's on their character sheets. It happens. There's a lot of stuff on your character sheet, depending on who a type of like City of Mist, your character sheets are a little bit more compact, but heaven knows on Pathfinder things, a lot of the times you stop and you go, oh wait, that's right. Wait, I have the ability to do that, don't I? I gained that ability at 6th level and I completely forgot about it. And so basically in superhero games can do the same thing, especially if you're dealing with ones which are more skills based as opposed to as opposed to the more story tag driven one in City of Mist. Powers are a completely complex long list of abilities and interactions and things like that. Be like you can have that reminder there, but you're like, okay, I'm setting this up, And then you're like, and if you're needing to make sure that the players are, basically, you want that building to catch fire as the Golden Crusader is going by. You've got a certain card in my hand. Yep. It's the basically, so you want that building to start to explode or catch fire or things like that as the Golden Crusader is going by, just helping to give that player their moment and bringing it to their attention and putting them in, set them up for success. Set them up so that they have this, like, oh, okay, cool. I've got this ability. Basically, hey, there's a burning building. There are people trapped inside. I can go in and help those people and basically and help deal with the situation while the rest of the party is doing that. I get my cool action moment. I get my cool cinematic thing. I get my challenges of dealing with what the system throws at me with dice rolls and things like that in a manageable way that isn't just, oh, yeah, I didn't spec my character to be super tanky or super blowy uppy, so I don't get to participate in the big fight. I don't get to play the game basically during this situation as well. Because that's the fun. Basically, the fun thing with superheroes, and I talked about it before with Mage and things like that, is everybody has, basically, especially urban situations and things like that, you have the ability to draw on the players, the actual players' knowledge of what these situations look like. People know what a downtown street looks like. They know what a climactic fight scene, basically, and they basically the walls of Helm's Deep looks like because of basically the Lord of the Rings. They know what a tavern could look like, etc., etc. Let them. You're giving them the words, basically, kind of the start, and then they're filling in the rest. And then, basically, in a game like City of Mist, their powers are adding more to it. Their ability, basically, powers and things like that, let them create situations or scenarios or basically take advantage of things in the area of the character who had police connections. Basically, you can add in, you can take advantage of that, and you can make that available to them. If they want to pull those into the situation, you can basically, you play along with it and let them tell the story along with you. And together you'll kind of build up that epic scene because much like basically, again, basically, you're kind of creating it in the moment and in the improv, and so it's not basically, it's much harder for one person to do it, but it's a lot easier for a group to do it. For all of basically for you and your players as a group to create this situation that they feel basically they feel like they've succeeded, that they've created something interesting with what their characters are built around and what they can do, and your job is to set them up for success, then encourage them when they start pushing on them, provide them examples if you need to, have your villain, basically, if your players aren't really taking advantage of the thing, have your villains start taking advantage of it. Have your villains start to throw people through glass windows. Have your villains grab parking meters and attack people with them. Basically, have your villains basically slip on the mail, which is scattered along on this basically on the street. Things like that. And basically show your players, basically lead by example, show your players what's possible, what can happen, and then encourage them when they respond in kind. I mean, that's kind of the big thing for all this. Basically, the big thing if you want to run a really cool, awesome cinematic fight is be open to things to go differently than how you planned it. Be open for the situation to change. Keep your core goals in mind. Basically, if I set up an event, basically, you're setting up your event to be basically the fight. Basically, you're going to basically make sure you know what your end goals are for the fight, and always kind of keep those available, keep those in mind when you're doing this. If you're like, okay, I want the players to come out of this feeling like heroes. I want the players to basically name for it needs to be heroes. Basically, That's good. That's good. That's good. I want them to remove this villain as a threat, or do I want? That's good, but not uninjured. Okay, cool. Keep in mind, basically, keeping those things in mind is going to be important for. Okay, the players are doing this. Basically, you're thinking kind of several steps ahead as your players are doing. It's like, okay, that's going to work great. Because they're going to blow. They're setting up to blow him back through a building, and then they get to the other side of the building and he's not there anymore. But there's basically blood. Basically, there's blood that leads into a manhole, and basically that or things like that. And then you have to like, okay, now I don't want them following him, so I need to come up with some reason why they wouldn't. There's more people to save. The building's coming down. They need to, etc., etc. Basically, things like that. But keeping those in mind means that you can guide those events and basically take advantage of what the players are doing, and you're building upon them to get the end result that you want, because you know what the end result that you want is. Not just, oh yeah, there's a fight scene here. There's a bad guy here, and he's got 20 minions. I want basically this is the effect I want. This is the theme I want. That this is what I want the players to feel at the end of this fight. That's going to give you more of that cinematic feel than just, hey, I'm throwing these things out here and I'm just wanting things to happen. And so basically all of those, basically in the end, you're going to want basically session 12. It's not session 12. It's meant to be session 1, but it turned into session 12. So you're going in here and you're adding those events. You're adding those locations. And now you have basically you have one place to look at them. We have one place to bounce between them. And basically, and you're marking it off when it's done. You're keeping a track of what the villains were. You're basically, remember, basically, like, we were just talking last week about things to do with basically how to build up your villain, how to build up your big bad, how to make them the parts of things and keep them involved. These big fights are going to be some of those things that keep them in your player's mind, especially if they are there but in the background. Like they don't need to take part in this fight. They have minions or lieutenants or other things to help them with that, or they're basically things can happen in this fight that you're going to want to keep track of. You're going to want to make notes of, hey, basically you're like, oh, okay, cool. Basically, I've got this critical hit. Basically, landed. Basically, a scar for future encounters. And if I'm sharing that with my players, basically, I can make sure I can remind the players of that information to be like, oh yeah, cool, you did this cool thing, and then you have it show up later. Now it's a living world. Now things are actually happening. Now they're having an effect, and that's just going to add to that feeling. Basically, heighten those feelings the next time. Basically, this kind of situation shows up. All right. It is so basically it's 6:25, so I'm going to start doing some of my wrap up. To start with, basically, the big bad. If you want to know more about big bads or basically BBEGs, big bad evil guy or gal. We just did a video about those last week. We took a look at Fabula Ultima, which is a TTRPG, known for big ultimate villains showing up and monologuing and doing things like that. So if you want to know more about that, you can check out our YouTube channel. That is where all of our videos are archived. That's where they're streaming. So if you're watching it over there, thanks for watching over there, either live or later. you can check that out there, or you can also check out a bunch of our other games and basically see either games we have played, whether they be video games, because basically obviously here's actually one last piece of advice: steal, rip off stuff, watch stuff, expose yourself to other media, have fun. Basically, give yourself cool ideas for cool things that can happen during your fight. Don't try to force something to be one for one. Don't recreate the Avengers fight scene one for one. Your players will get bored really quickly once they figure it out. Also, your players won't play along and you'll have to rewrite it anyway. But keep basically play video games, watch movies, things like that. Those basically a lot of these books, basically when you're looking at stuff like basically like City of Mist, and basically World of Darkness is famous. Basically, the World of Darkness books are famous for having huge sections in them on inspirations for basically to get a good inspiration for this particular type of setting. Watch these movies. Basically, here's some of the movies that inspired us when we were writing this. Basically, watch some of this stuff and pull in those ideas of into your game. Feel the theme they're going for. Even if it isn't stuff that necessarily you think, like Casablanca was what I was talking about earlier, and not a lot of people are going to put Casablanca and role-playing games in the same breath. But hey, good storytelling is good storytelling. And so basically, that's why we play video games here. We explore a lot of different interesting stuff there. We've also played this. If you want to check out a lot of the other systems we've looked at for, like I talked about in here, stealing mechanics from from other games is basically perfectly allowable. There is no law against it. You could do it. You can take the tag system from City of Mist and Powered by the Apocalypse and basically work it into D&D. It's fine. If it's something you and your players enjoy, do it. Great. Like the opening of this book talks about how they've taken a Powered by Apocalypse and they're borrowed from a different or free RPG that they pulled a mechanic from. I think it was, which one did they pull from? I think I saw it the other day. Well, I can't find it. I think it's on their website, basically, but it's pulling in those things, and you can you take advantage of them and use them. So basically that's why we have those videos and those system videos on our website. You can check out if you go to our website, you can see the system page that talks about all the different other systems we've looked at, from cute, cheerful games like I forgot the name of the cooking drawing RPG. Oh no. But basically there's that. Basically, it's a fun gardening cooking RPG. TTRPG. We looked at. We've also looked at Alien and Mothership and horror and things like that, and stress and other things. There are all sorts of fun mechanics and different things you can look at to help build the game that you want to play. So feel free to basically check those out on our website. While you're on the website, you can also, basically, if you're interested in LoreLink itself, the system I've been working at, basically this ability to take notes, link things together, keep them organized. So, because again, like what I talked about during this, keeping things moving, keeping things snappy is going to help you keep the players interested and keep them moving in the game, and basically more likely to give you cool stuff when it doesn't feel like they're bogging things down, slowing things up, and basically by throwing weird things out and basically into the game. LoreLink is a great way of keeping all these things organized. That's why we made it, is so that we can help people basically keep playing the game that they want to play and not struggle with notes and note taking and basically looking things up on websites or other things. That's why LoreLink is here, and it's available. Basically, the free tier is currently available on the website. You can for free basically sign up at our world tier level, which gives you 2 accounts, which gets you a majority of the features that you see here. The only things you don't get for free tier is you don't get the ability to share with other players, and you also don't get the ability to mark up maps. But everything else, the timelines, the sessions, the events, locations, all that stuff is available for free at the world tier, just limited to 2 campaigns. But that's available right now if you go off to our website, which is basically it's at our basically get started page on our website, which is lorelink.com. And so if you basically go check that out there, you can also sign up for our newsletter there, which is a quick and easy way of being able to basically being able to get in more information about what streams we're running, what cool, interesting stuff we're looking at, what cool things that we're happening in terms of development, new features and things like that we're adding. All of that is available in the newsletter. That comes out just once a month. And that the next one will be coming out here at the end of this week, I believe. February is such a weird month. Like, the month's almost over, but it's still relatively early in the month. It's always a mess. But that is coming out basically this week. So basically sign up for it and you'll get that on Friday. We'll be talking about cool new features and talking about all the cool streams we're doing from now, what we're planning to run in the future. If you want more up-to-date conversations in terms of when we're having conversations about interesting mechanics, basically fun things, basically other conversations we have with RPGs, fun situations, things like that, check us out on Blue Sky. That's where you'll find up-to-the-date information over streams and things like that. Obviously, of course, since we're streaming, there's all the traditional stuff, ways to support us here. You can follow us here on this channel. That will give you a chance to find out when we go live, when we're playing video games or doing other stuff. You can follow us here for that. You can say, hey, I think what you guys is doing cool, and you can subscribe. If you happen to have a Amazon Prime gaming account, you can always throw your free monthly subscription over our way. You can take money directly from Jeff Bezos' pocket and put it into ours, and we will not spend it on non-DLC yachts. We had to put the DLC modifier in there because we might at some point download an expansion to a game which takes place on a yacht, and so we had to put that disclaimer in there. But we won't buy physical, actual yachts, and we won't make countries disassemble bridges to get them in and out of. And so you could do that if you're over on YouTube. Obviously, liking and subscribing and commenting on videos is a free and easy way of basically saying, hey, I support you guys. I'm interested in what you're doing. Basically, I'd like the algorithm to basically pay you more attention. And like and subscribe, newsletters. I'm running through all the other things. I think that's it. We will be back here next week, continuing the superhero theme. Basically in honor of the fact that basically the new Marvel movie has come out, Captain America, basically, and the Brave New World. I think it's Captain America Brave New World. There was Captain America. It was one point it was called New World Order, and then they changed it to Brave New World. I think because New World Order was uncomfortably close to conspiracy theories, and so they changed it. I think it's Brave New World. But basically, if you go watch that, you want to basically play stuff. City of Mist is a cool way of playing with superhero stuff. Feng Shui is a cool way of playing with superhero stuff. And basically next week we will be playing Marvel Ultimate Alliance, the classic, basically the classic co-op. Our co-op games get messy. There are exploding things in this game, so we cannot guarantee that everyone will make it out. Cannot make everyone will make it out alive. But we'll see how they basically tune in next week to see how that works out. Till then, basically we will catch you all later. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.